again. I'm teaching children again. And teaching English is strange because you can teach word by word by word, but you can't construct a language just from its words. You have to get into concepts and meaning. So I find teaching stories is good because they have enough English that they can think, okay, bird, yellow bird. Yellow bird is in the tree. He's happier than me because he can fly away from his adversity, stuff like that. They get that and they're happy when they get that. So I was reading this old story. I don't know if it's Buddhist or Hindu or from where. It was collected in a book by uh, a man named Anthony de Mello. You may know him. He was some kind of he was a Jesuit priest working in India. And the thing about the Jesuits is they have to consider a lot of different ideas in their preaching. Uh, their their motto is for the greater glory of God. So in a way, that's kind of like the Sankirtan devotee who says, by hook or by crook, get them a book. Doesn't matter what you do. Get them to take some prasadam and chant Hare Krishna. You know, uh, Ignatius Loyola, who founded the Jesuits, was an interesting man because he was rejected by the priesthood a number of times and then really had to study, and they kind of said, well, yeah, okay. So he set up a school to teach Latin and Greek so that his preachers were not wholly ignorant of the scriptures anyway. So this Mello, he was preaching in India. I think he was born in India. He lived there. And this is in the 1960s. And he's collected a nice book of little stories. And you'll find that some of those stories are repeated by Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, Prabhupada, even Srila Sridhar Maharaj, like the story of the sycophant, Srila
Yes.
Sridhar Maharaj would tell all these anecdotes. So I was contemplating this problem of how to see everything as a favorable wave, um, because I live close to a church about 100 meters away from a Catholic church. And they're always, it's Mexican Catholicism. Tapanandini will understand. They they like to shoot off bottle rockets all the time. And sometimes I wonder, well, wait a minute, what does gunpowder have to do with the Prince of Peace? Jesus Christ was the Prince of Peace. Why so many explosions? Um, and then they'll have little festivals in front of the church where they play this terrible music. It's hard to categorize as music. It's really just noise. It goes, dam, 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 and then bang, 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 bang. And I'm thinking, oh, this noise, Jesus Christ, he's the Prince of Peace. So how does this figure, because it really just, I'm trying to contemplate, well, tomorrow's Janmashtami, you know, Sri Krishna himself, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, is descending upon this earth. What a favorable, and, I'm entering into Om and Hare Krishna, peace. And there's all this noise. But then again, even the devotees do that. I remember once I was in St. Petersburg, jet lagged, really tired, up all night after discussing, theology and Krishna consciousness with Abhidut Maharaj. And the devotees were doing a kirtan on the patio outside where I'm trying to sleep. And the thing is, there was no melody. It was really cacophony from a musical point of view. It wasn't anything melodic or harmonic. They couldn't even really keep a rhythm going. But yet, there ecstatically chanting the holy name of Krishna. So there's a part of me that says, I just want to sleep. But there's another part of me saying, well, I need to appreciate that kirtan. Maybe I should go outside and join them. And then, I remembered, well, when Akshayananda Maharaj or Sagar Maharaj, he used to sit on the roof of the temple in Navadvip, not the temple, but the blue house, a rented house down the street. And he had this little uh, Hindu violin thing. I don't know if it's a sarangi. I can't remember the name of the instrument that he would play at 4 o'clock in the morning, waking everybody up. And he would often go to Srila Sri Ramanuj and say, is there anything wrong with playing music? And Sri Ramanuj would kind of very politely and kindly tell him, this is for a sannyasi, this is kind of an anartha. You should not be charmed by the senses. Music is a kind of charm to the senses. This may not be the best activity for you. And many devotees will say, well, music is prohibited by, Srila Sridhar Maharaj and his subsequent followers for those reasons. But I'm listening to this kirtan noise and I'm going, well, this is not music. It's definitely not music. It's noise. But then I thought to myself, there's 20th century composers like Terry Riley or Philip Glass that compose things that sound like noise. There was this man in the desert, his name was Harry Partch. He invented his own music instruments that had microtones. And it's very avant-garde, but if you listen to it, sometimes it kind of sounds like, noise. The Beatles, they have a song called Revolution 9 on the White Album, where they're just recording people walking in and out of rooms and saying random things like number 9, number 9. And this was hailed as a great avant-garde composition. So who am I to say that this is noise? Really, they're praising the Lord. So these concepts have been sitting in my mind for a while. And I happened upon this story by Anthony de Mello, collected from some source, I don't know where, but he talks about the saint who was living in a quiet ashram or monastery somewhere and meditating on the Lord. And in the morning, he has to give his sermon. But there's all this noise, there's the cacophony. So he goes outside and he says, silence. And because he's a great saint, everybody follows his order, except for the frogs. And there's a bunch of frogs out there in the jungle going, burp, burp, burp. And with this, he can't think. He's thinking, why? Why do I have to listen to this? This is making me crazy. I can't properly meditate. I can't say the holy name. And then, so he goes outside and he talks to one of the other abbots of the monastery and explains his problem. And he said, well, you have special mystic power. Command complete silence. So he did so, and the frogs were silent. Then he said, but I'd like to ask you one more thing. Command that now everybody praises the holy name of God. And so the saint thought, well, okay, now that's an interesting proposition. And so by his mystic power, he commands everyone to praise the holy name of God. And the first thing he hears is the frogs going, brow, brow, brow. And he realizes, well, wait a minute. Who am I to be so quick to judge? These frogs are making a terrible noise, but what they're doing is praising the holy name of God. So I have to see that as a favorable way, you see. So I remember also when I was listening to that kirtan, I thought, okay, so this is dysphonic, it's cacophonic, but who am I to say that there must be melody or harmony or any of the elements of music? Because after all, the holy name of Krishna transcends all these things. And so I thought about this for a while, and I found it very comforting because I'm reflecting on how Krishna appears on Janmashtami. And I'm thinking, well, every human soul, in its own way, her own way, is doing something to try to connect with God, to, uh, in a sense, vibrate the holy name of God. We don't see it that way because we're thinking, chant Hare Krishna or die. You know, we're doing Sankirtan, but on a more elemental level, uh, everything that lives is seeking out that higher power, that divine power, divine love even, and their efforts go towards that. And so that's a favorable thing, no matter how perverse it might appear to our external vision. So the story, I like that story about the frogs. It, you know, sometimes maybe someone is croaking in the kirtan, you know, making a terrible noise. But you have to think, well, here's a humble soul reaching out to God and trying to vibrate the holy name. Um, and so far as John Mastami, I'm looking for a quote on the uh, internet that I can't find. Perhaps one of you might know. But I remember Srila Sridhar Maharaj saying that on John Mastami, everyone was celebrating down in the temple. And the guests are arriving and the preachers are preaching. But he went upstairs to sit outside the room or apartment of Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur. And another sannyasi came up to him and said, well, what are you doing here? You should be down there with the festival, you know, you should be canvassing for new members, you know, or preaching. Why are you up here? And Srila Sridhar Maharaj said, well, here's my logic, you know. It seems to me that today Krishna appears. This is the 8th day of the Balaram moon, Janmashtami. Balaram, his moon came out 8 days ago to clear the path, so to speak, to enlighten the world with uh, moonshine. And now it's time for Krishna. But where does he appear exactly? Does he appear in Vrindavan? Is it only that Vrindavan will be blessed by the divine appearance of Sri Krishna? He said, it seems to me that where Krishna appears is in the heart of his pure devotee. And so the clock is about to strike 12. I want to see what happens. There is Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur. He's the pure devotee of Krishna. The Supreme Personality of Godhead Krishna is about to appear in his heart. Shouldn't we be here? And that other man was speechless. You know, he didn't know what to say. So where exactly does Krishna appear? I found this on the internet. I'll read it a little bit. I know I'm going off subject since our subject is Sri Guru and his grace, but we skipped a couple of meetings, and I think it's all right if I read this. It's Srila Sridhar Maharaj talking about Krishna's supernatural birth. A devotee asks him, Could you describe the details of Krishna's birth? And Srila Sri Ramakrishna says, on the whole, it is something like imitation. It's nothing like the things we conceive of with our material senses. Krishna, a spiritual body, came and showed himself being born physically. It was an imitation, a show, like a drama, a play. The devotee asks, did Krishna appear as a child with 4 arms, or in his mature Vishnu form with a crown and ornaments? And Srila Sri Ramakrishna replies, when he came out, Vasudeva and Devaki's eyes were attracted, and they saw him with 4 arms and many ornaments. By his will, the iron gate to their cell opened, and the Jamuna, even during the rainy season, became shallow. A jackal showed Vasudeva the path, and he walked through the water of the Jamuna. When he came back, the gate of the cell closed as it was previously. From the material standpoint, all these supernatural events are inconceivable and impossible. They took place only by the Lord's will. The Lord did not come here by any particular material process, but he did imitate material processes as far as possible. Then the devotee asks, so Krishna was born as a 4-armed mature form of Vishnu, not a 4-armed baby form? Srila Sri Rama, when Vasudeva was beside Devaki at the time of birth, he saw the Lord in a 4-handed, full-grown form as Vishnu, decorated with ornaments, and began to praise him. That Vishnu form then advised Vasudeva, do this, and do this. Then the Lord became a Prakrita Shishu, an ordinary baby. When Vasudeva first saw the Lord, he saw a 4-armed form of Vishnu. That Vishnu form gave Vasudeva some advice, and then assumed a form like that of an ordinary child. Vasudeva carried out the Lord's order and took him, the child, to Nanda Maharaja's home in Gokula. And we don't know if this is the same devotee. It just says devotee. Maharaj, doesn't Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur comment that 2 Krishnas appeared at the same time? Srila Sridhar, yes, at the same time that this 4-armed Vishnu form appeared before Vasudeva, Yashoda gave birth to a male baby and a female baby. Both of these babies were beside Yashoda when Vasudeva arrived, but Vasudeva could not detect that. According to the advice he had received from the Lord, Vasudeva placed the baby that was in his arms beside Yashoda. And as soon as he did so, Yashoda's male baby absorbed Vasudeva's baby. Vasudeva only saw Yashoda's female baby, and he took her and put her beside Devaki. Then their cell closed as it was previously. At that time, intimation went to the watchmen. They became conscious, and when they heard the newborn baby crying, at once they informed Kamsa, who came and found that the baby was a girl. He wondered, why is this so? A male child must be born to kill me, but a girl has been born. Do the gods also speak lies? What is this? He asked Vasudeva, why is the child a girl? Give me explanation. Vasudeva replied, you can see the child with your own eyes. Kamsa wondered what he should do, and then he took the girl by the legs with his hand, as he did with Devaki's other children, previously and thrust the baby onto the stone. As he did so, however, the girl slipped from his hand, flew into the sky, assumed the eight-armed form of Katyayani, and said, "Who will kill you is growing up in Gokula." Then she disappeared. Kamsa wondered what he should do, and then he engaged many spies to find all the newborn babies in Vrindavan. He first sent Putana to kill Krishna. She did her service, but the effect came in the opposite way. Aga, Baka, and all the demons who Kamsa secretly engaged in trying to kill Krishna ended up failing in this way. This is from a talk given by Srila Sri Maharaj. I'm not sure when, but I saw that on the Facebook, and I liked it. I'm going to take a look in the chat. People are posting things. Tapanandini invites us to see the alignment of the planets tomorrow. Any questions? Comment?
Dandavats Mayavi Prabhu.
Dhanyavad.
Yeah, we're just wondering if we can talk a little bit about Srila Prabhupada's, your experience today, his Vyasa Puja, Srila Prabhupada's Vyasa Puja. So if it is possible, you can give some your...
It's actually going to start with that because today is also celebrated on the Punjika or the Vaishnava calendar as the appearance day of His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada. And the Punjika, the Vaishnava calendar, is sometimes a bit problematic because you will have the disappearance of some great saint on the same day as the appearance of another great saint, or we may be celebrating Ram Navami or something, and then there's another occasion. So at times we find, especially in the temples, that whoever is the speaker or the devotee will look at the Punjika and address the event of the day. And for me, it's difficult because it's hard to address all the different concepts revolving around Sri Krishna Bhagavan, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and then change gears and talk about one of the saints. But we're charged with that task. So, see, today's divine appearance day of His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada. And, Omagana Jamanandasya Gananjana Shalakaya Chakshura Militam Jaina Tasmai Shri Guruve Namaha. None of us really would be speaking about Krishna without his mercy and his grace. At some point in the 1960s, he decided that the only way to propagate the Krishna consciousness movement would be to involve the Westerners. So he left his wife and his family and took sannyas and went to the Radha Damodar temple in Vrindavan, where he began his translation of Srimad Bhagavatam in 3 volumes. And after a lot of austerity and hard work, he went to Sumati Murarji, who owned the Scindia steamship lines. he tried to propagate Krishna consciousness in India, but he just met one obstacle after the next, after the next. The Gaudiya Math, in his opinion, had not really fulfilled its promise under Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur and after his subsequent disappearance. And what had happened was that certain highly qualified individuals and people who were interested in Krishna consciousness and Vaishnavism came to Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, and their love for his mission gradually became transformed into a formalistic structure. And upon his disappearance, people argued over the real estate and who gets to run this temple and who gets to run that temple and where does the money go. And instead of inspiring generations of people in India to return to their traditions and rediscover the Bhagavad Gita and Krishna consciousness, and especially Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, he saw that people in India tended to long for the modernism of the West. And try as he might, he tried to form something called the League of Devotees, but it didn't really work. And he could see that after the Second World War, there was an opening to global ideas. In the United States, we were exposed to all kinds of things that we had never heard of before, partly because of the World War. But if you turned on the television, you could see dancers from Azerbaijan or musicians from Greece. And so people in the United States at that time, we were a little open. Also because of the atomic bomb and the idea that we could all be turned into ashes for someone's political purposes. Thinkers began questioning the Judeo-Christian Abrahamic format of formalized Western religion and began turning to the East for answers. At that time, the Beatles, they got interested in transcendental meditation and the Maharishi. And so Srila Prabhupada happened to come on the scene somehow by the grace of Krishna at a particularly perfect moment. He set himself up after a few false starts with some yoga societies. One Dr. Mishra, who had been a friend or associate of his, he set himself up in New York, but in the dirtiest, darkest, most dangerous part of New York, which was the Bowery, Skid Row. But by some happy circumstance, sometimes when an urban area is really run down, the rents get cheap and artists and thinkers and poets move in. And so by some happy circumstance, there was this poet named Allen Ginsberg, who had been celebrated as sort of an alternative thinker, living in the Bowery at that time with other poets like Jack Kerouac and Lawrence Ferlinghetti. And they had a whole crew of beatniks, they called them at that time. And Allen Ginsberg was particularly taken by this strange yoga swami with his flowing orange robes, who seemed to be floating above the street in this dark and terrible place in New York. And he took an interest, as well as others, devotees who later became Satsarup Goswami and Kirtananda Maharaj. And they came to the Swami. He had a tiny little rented storefront later. After his books had been stolen and some things had been stolen, his new friends helped him rent a really cheap storefront called Matchless Gifts, oddly. Matchless Gifts, something like Chintamani. And Srila Prabhupada, he began preaching his heart out and focusing on the Hare Krishna mantra. And at that time, with the hippie movement and the interest in India, transcendental meditation, Eastern thought, gurus, somehow the Hare Krishna mantra clicked with the people. And he found himself in Tompkins Square Park, a local park where intellectuals and alternative people would come and hang out. And he started a kirtan, and other people would join in. And then they wanted to know, what is this? What do we have to do? And he told them, well, Hare Krishna mantra is a transcendental sound. It will deliver you to the highest level of reality, but you need to purify your life. You have to give up all these drugs and marijuana smoking and taking alcohol and promiscuous sex. All these things are contaminating your mind. Stop eating abominable foods like, meat, fish, eggs, all these things, alcohol. Don't get involved in, gambling. So he gave these 4 different regulative principles in the Krishna mantra. And these hopeless people who were suffering, they were attracted. And this kind of mirrors what Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu did in 16th century in India, when he attracted people who were suffering. And he said, well, I'm here for the lowest. Then Jagai and Madhai insulted him. And Nityananda said, it's okay, I'll take care of the lowest. So in a sense, Srila Sri Ramesh later says that Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada, he's something like a Shaktivesh avatar. He's something like the living, breathing descent of Nityananda Prabhu, who's come to the darkest place in the world to help the darkest people doing the darkest things to rise up to the highest level. And so then he initiated a few disciples there in New York, including a few women like Jadharani, who later went on to paint so many beautiful paintings for Bhagavad Gita and other publications. And Allen Ginsberg, meanwhile, had gone to San Francisco. And in San Francisco, there was even sort of a more fermented or a more bubbly version of what was going on in New York with psychedelic bands like the Jefferson Airplane, the Grateful Dead, all centered in an area called Haight-Ashbury, where the so-called hippie movement was sort of born. And some devotees invited Srila Prabhupada to fly to San Francisco and set up a small Radha Krishna temple, practically next door to where the Grateful Dead had their house, and they were rehearsing their strange brand of rock music. And a couple doors down from a place called the Diggers. The Diggers had a thing called the Free Store, where people would come and leave stuff. And then you could go there and shop for free. You could just walk in and take anything you wanted. And so the hippies would go in there and say, oh, look at this hat. How much is the hat? No, take it. It's yours. Really? Yeah, it's for the people. It's a free store. And somehow that, in the summer of 1967, somehow that worked for a while. And then the devotees would go on Hari Nam and play their drums. In those days, they didn't really have a mridanga from India. That was a big luxury. They would use a bongo drum or a cheap hand drum and go out on the street with, they had kartals and chant Hare Krishna. And they were discovered by the Grateful Dead and the followers of the Grateful Dead. Uh, and they organized a big festival rock and roll show at a place called the Avalon Ballroom, which was run by Bill Graham, who used to organize concerts at the Fillmore East in New York, and he organized concerts at the Fillmore West in California, San Francisco. So they invited Janis Joplin and the Quicksilver Messenger Service and the Grateful Dead and His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada to play at this giant auditorium where lots of people were doing terrible things like taking LSD and smoking marijuana. But somehow in the middle of it all, Prabhupada came out and chanted Hare Krishna, and he taught everyone the mantra. And the thing is, the Hare Krishna mantra is transcendental sound. It's unlike any other kind of sound or mantra. And once people had heard it, they wanted more. So they began to come to the temple there, and they established Radha Krishna deities. They might have begun with a photo at the temple in San Francisco. And pretty soon, Bhakti Sudhir Goswami, who was Dear Krishna Das Brahmachari at the time, he joined there. And he told me some stories about what it was like at the temple there. There were 6 or 7 brahmacharis. They all had this tiny bathroom. And some new guy came in, and he's brushing his teeth. And someone else said, "Hey, where's my toothbrush?" And the new guy says, "Oh, we get our own toothbrush?" Like they were sharing the toothbrushes. Didn't really have a concept of being, Suchi Brahmanized. And of course, much of that is now changed. Then from there, they established a temple in Los Angeles and then in Chicago. And pretty soon they went to London and started something there. And there was this one devotee, Mukunda Das, who was very charismatic, very sweet man. I've seen him talk. I knew him. My devotee name at that time, when I joined, was Mukunda Mala Das, which refers to a book of shlokas by King Kulashekar, who was an Alwar from South India, in praise of Krishna. But he was Mukunda Das. And of course, Mala in Spanish, it means bad. So Mukunda Mala meant bad Krishna to all my Mexican devotee friends. But the real Mukunda, he was a very nice man. And by chanting Hare Krishna in the street in London, as Pranashish would know, England is a smaller society. What people do there, it's a lot more in-house than in the United States. It's a giant country. So pretty soon, word of the Hare Krishnas and their strange going on got to the British pop music industry, and somehow the Beatles took a liking to Mukunda Das. George Harrison in particular, because he'd been to India. And like I said before, they were interested in transcendental meditation and so on. But they found out that the Maharishi was a bit of a fraud in terms of their own particular judgment on the situation. And there's a Beatles song called Sexy Sadie on the White Album. Sexy Sadie, what have you done? You made a fool of everyone, something like that. But the original name of the song was Maharishi. What have you done? But somebody said that's not commercial. You have to change the name of the song. So they did. But George Harrison in particular, he was looking for something a little deeper. Maharishi, of course, was a fan of Shankaracharya. And Shankaracharya, his whole line is, I am you, and you are me, and she is he, as we are all together, as John Lennon put it. But George Harrison was looking for something a little deeper, and he found the Bhagavad Gita, and this Mukunda Das led him to Srila Prabhupada. And George Harrison was nice enough to donate his house, Bhaktivedanta Manor, to the devotees in London. It's in Letchmore Heath. I had the opportunity to stay there, and we had a little kirtan in George Harrison's recording studio. It's strange. It's underneath the stairs. You know, as you're going up the stairs, sometimes there's a little door, and you open the door and go in there, and in the back there's another door that leads into a big recording studio. It was really cool. But anyway, so George Harrison donated his house. The devotees went to him and said, listen, we want to print this book called Krishna Book. And he said, well, go ahead. I said, yeah, but we need some money. How much do you need? 25,000 pounds. Okay. Is that all? And so he paid for the first printing of Krishna Book. And he in the prologue, he writes something like, all you need is love, Krishna, George Harrison. And that signature helped us sell hundreds and millions of Krishna books. And so as Srila Prabhupada began wandering around the Earth planet in his late 70s, he went from one place to the next, establishing little preaching centers that gradually became temples. And they said, well, what should we call this? And he said, well, we should call this the International Society for Krishna Consciousness. And so ISKCON was born. And I came up in Los Angeles in the 70s. And what I liked about it was that here there were Black people, some people from Africa, some people from Harlem, some people from downtown Los Angeles. There were Spanish-speaking people, refugees from Cuba, migrants from Mexico, some guy from Spain. We had a mridanga player, Bali Mardan, I think. We used to call him Ricky Ricardo, because he had that big drum, like from I Love Lucy. I don't know if you get the reference, but, there was Agni Dev from Trinidad. He's a Black devotee. He made this delicious plantain soup. Plantains are big green bananas like that. He made this delicious soup with plantains and lentils and dal, which was not exactly, an East Indian recipe, but he was from the West Indies. So he was the temple commander in Laguna Beach. I like the idea that we had devotees from India, China, Africa, Europe. It was an international society. And what that taught me was Krishna consciousness is not something that's limited to, high-class Brahmins in Bengal or Delhi, or in high-class Brahmins in South India. No, this is a universal message, as it should be. Either we take it that Krishna consciousness is There's something so esoteric, nobody can really understand it except for 5 people on the planet, and they're all going to fight about what it really is. You know, there's so and so Maharaj and such Maharaj, but they're enemies, you know. Or this is something universal. Krishna consciousness speaks to every human soul on the planet, and anybody can chant Hare Krishna. Srila Prabhupada has this beautiful message that he spoke in a lecture, and they recorded it, I think, on the Radha Krishna album, where he's chanting Hare Krishna, and at the end he gives a little talk, and he says, the Hare Krishna mantra is available for everyone. Even a child can do it, and even a dog can do it. And I'm like, wow, even a dog, even me, you know. Rupa Goswami in his Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu, I think it is, he says, take what I'm giving you as fire. Take it. A fire may be produced by a low-class man rubbing sticks together, but we don't question the origin of the fire. If it's hot, if it gives light and heat, it's fire, and we accept it. So, curiously, human beings have a tendency to break off into countries, states, cities, you know, pueblos, tribes, families. And then we like to think, well, no, this is only for me and maybe my family, and everybody else is wrong. On some level, maybe that's correct. On some level, you can say, this is mine. Krishna is mine. He's not yours. You can't have him. He's mine. That's very nice. See? But on another level, we should believe that if such a thing as God exists, and you know, there's hundreds and thousands of philosophers, scientists, materialists who would like us to believe there's no such thing as God, there's no meaning in the universe. Don't look for that. It's a waste of your time, right? But if God exists, then he should exist for everyone. He should be available for everyone. Srila Sridhar Maharaj said he was attracted when he was in university to a particular teacher who taught about Hegel and perhaps Kant. So I don't know if it's Hegel or Kant. It's what Western philosopher says this. They point out that it is not that God is an argument for consciousness. It's the other way around. Consciousness is an argument for God. If such a thing as consciousness exists, it implies the existence of God. If the soul exists, if you and I experience the miracle of being able to see and walk and talk and communicate with others, that's an amazing miracle that cannot be quantified or explained by any amount of scientific argument. And it argues for a higher power. It means there's gradation everywhere, as Darwin points out. Darwin's whole idea of evolution is it's not really, he can't prove that X becomes Y. But he can say, well, look, there's A, B, C, D, E, F, G, X, Y, Z. There's all this gradation. Something is going on there. Evolution, we'll call it that, right? But there's no proof that one thing becomes another thing. But there is gradation, which is my point, right? So if you've all seen, if you go to a museum, you can see in the evolution exhibit horses, right? They have a horse that's only this big. And then they have a horse that's like yay high. And then there's a pony. And then there's a big one. Then there's a dray, right? It doesn't mean that the pony became the dray, but there is gradation, and that cannot be denied. So if gradation exists everywhere, why would there not be a gradation of consciousness? And if there is soul consciousness, there must be a higher brand, must be a higher kind of consciousness. So the idea of Atma, it argues for Paramatma or Bhagavan. And if Bhagavan exists, if there is a God, then he can't just be for a little tribe of people who live over in a tiny section who have a particular ritual that they do. God has to be for all human souls, all souls. Paramatma exists infinitely for all the finite Atmas. So then, if there is validity to Krishna consciousness must be available to everyone, regardless of race, color, creed, language. Doesn't matter if you're from South India, Ireland, Mexico, the United States. It should be for everyone. And this is really, because I was asked to speak about Srila Prabhupada on his day. That's really his contribution. His contribution is not simply creating an organization that some people are trying to continue by paying the rent on the buildings that they acquired some time ago. No more than Christianity exists only in the particular buildings that are being rented by some reverend over in Poughkeepsie, Iowa. It's universal. And that is what Srila Prabhupada came to do. And to a large extent, he was successful. He said that he liked the philosophy of the blind man and the strong man, the strong man and the lame man, right? The strong man is blind and he can't see. But he takes the lame man on his shoulders, something like Pinky in the Brain. And the lame man has no legs, but he can see. So he directs the big strong man. And he said the strong man is like the West. You're very powerful economically, but you have no imagination and no vision. The lame man is like India. India's weak economically, but has Vedic vision. So the two should get together. And his other point was that when people in India see that the people of the West are taking to Krishna consciousness, they'll imitate it because they like to imitate the West. Everyone is losing dhotis. People don't wear dhotis and saris anymore. They wear Levi's and T-shirts. They're imitating the West. But what happens when the West starts wearing dhotis and saris? People in India will go, wait a minute, you're stealing that. You're appropriating our culture. This is ours. We're proud of it, and we'll do it. So he was right about that. Now, in the old days, in India, the predominant point of view was always Shivism, but Vaishnavism is on the rise. Even the Prime Minister Modi, he'll be seen. I don't know how much of a Hare Krishna devotee he is, but he will be seen at Hare Krishna temples, accepting Bhagavad Gitas and speaking highly of Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada. Now, Swami Prabhupada appears on the postage stamps of India. So he accomplished his goal. On the other hand, there's a need to preserve that living tradition in a deep philosophical way. The teachings have to be continued. And so that's why I'm here reading Sri Guru and His Grace. But I think I've used up my time for today. I'm not able to really speak inspirationally about Srila Prabhupada in the same way that others are, but because I'm not very qualified, I can't really come up to the mark, you know. And my love for Srila Prabhupada, it's not entirely exclusive because I also love Srila Sridhar Maharaj. He's the one who saved my life after Prabhupada moved on. I was not fortunate enough to be 10 years younger when I joined the movement. Srila Prabhupada passed away about a year after I joined, and then his young disciples tried to make sense of his teachings. And I don't want to speak poorly of anyone, but when I found Srila Sridhar Maharaj, it was like, wow, this is the source. Now I'm drinking from the river over there that emptied into the sea. That was phenomenal. But this little natural spring that's coming out of a rock, that water is so fresh and pure. You know, this is Srila Sridhar Maharaj. So I'm captured fully by Srila Sridhar Maharaj. But I sold my head just to Bhaktivedanta Swami in 1976. I said, this is what I want. I read the Bhagavad Gita. I was lost. I didn't know what I was going to do. You know, I was a young man, 20 years old, and in a difficult situation. And I thought, where do I go? What do I do? And I read the Bhagavad Gita, and that changed my life. You know, I had a friend of mine who used to sell books together. His name was Kurutama, black devotee. We used to sell books together in the airport. And I asked him, you know, how did you come to Krishna consciousness? Well, he said, I was a football star, American football, which is, you know, very dangerous. And I was playing football one day and I broke my leg and I was in the hospital. And my friends brought me these books, big books, because I was going to be in the hospital for a long time. And one of the books I had was Origin of the Species by Charles Darwin. And the other big fat book I had was Bhagavad Gita by A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada. And he thought, I'll read the Bhagavad Gita. And after he read that, he changed his life. He's still around somewhere. If he's out there listening, you know, Hare Krishna, Prabhu, it's good to see you. So, any questions? Don't be shy. No, okay. You know, we did it. We did an hour. It's good to see you. Thank you very much for giving me a chance to do this. I have like I said, I have a sore tooth, and the vibration of my voice really makes it hurt. Hi, hello. Thank you for joining us today. Everybody excused themselves for 3 weeks for Ratha Yatra, you know, Janmashtami, and festivals in Dublin. And I can't provide you with that level of intense Hare Krishna, peace and love, good vibrations, but I do what I can. So thank you once again, all of you. And tune in next week when we discover the mysteries of Sri Guru and His grace, by His divine grace, Bhakti Rakshak Sridhar Goswami. As for now, Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Ki Jai, and we'll see you next.
Prabhu, for sharing this, my dandavats, and also wanted to say Advai Krishna and Haripriya send their dandavats to you. They couldn't be here today, and but they are sending the dandavats to you and the other devotees. And
All right. My dandavats to all of you.
yeah, so